Friends, welcome back to my podcast. I really have to do this all the time. This is my dream. I want to do it. I just have to go for it and actually do it. I want to do like 2 or 3 a week. And now that I live alone, if you've been following me, I've just gone through a divorce, and that was an insane and difficult experience. But I have this apartment now, and I'm really going to dedicate myself to what I really want to do, which is use my voice, which is my gift, and share my thoughts. And I'm going to do it in the form of a podcast. Now, I've been nerding out about telepathy, as has the rest of the world. The podcast is the Telepathy tapes. It was more popular than Joe Rogan's podcast, and everyone listened to it. If you haven't listened to it yet, you definitely should, because it's a place of spirituality that is beyond religion and beyond Christianity. I bring up Christianity because obviously we're speaking English and we're in the West and our culture is Western. So that's the Abrahamic religion that's relevant to this discussion. But it's a very spiritual perspective, and the podcast is about autistic kids that can practice nonverbal autistic kids that have telepathic abilities. It's absolutely fascinating and paradigm shifting. So I want to talk about an experience I had. I've shared it before, but I was experimenting with telepathy, with animal communication. And there was one time only, that I was able to do something, and it was with Alfie, and it was like 7 years ago. Alfie is my oldest male golden retriever. He's still alive, barely. I was practicing telepathy. They say, picture it leaving your mind, picture the animal receiving it and seeing what you're saying. And I tried it, and I had a conversation with Alfie, and for confirmation, I asked him to come over and bring his ball and sit in front of me. That's exactly what he did. And then he dropped it in my lap, just as I asked him to do. So it was an incredible, veridical experience for me. But the most fascinating part, really, the more that I think about it through the years, is that I was the one doing the experiment. I was the one quieting my mind, meditating. I had to do all this prep work to get into the space where I could potentially telepathically communicate with my dog, which ended up happening. But he wasn't meditating. He didn't take time to get into the space. That's a nonverbal creature that apparently was just already there. He was already able to receive the communication like it was nothing to him. It was so normal. It was ordinary. It was everyday. And so the idea of nonverbal people and nonverbal sentient creatures on this earth having the ability to communicate telepathically it's quite amazing to us, but it could be the most normal thing. We have things that we call intuition and precognition, clairvoyance. But Sugar Ray Robinson, before his huge fight with Jimmy Doyle in 1947, he had a dream, a very intense, strong dream, that if he went through with the fight, he was going to kill Jimmy Doyle with a left hook. I'm kind of a boxing fanatic. I love boxing. Boxing is like my sport. And I'm not saying that I'm good at it. I do love boxing, though. I love sparring. I love learning the sport. So anyway, he tried to tell these people, hey, I can't do the fight. I got to cancel it. I totally know I'm going to kill this guy. I just know it. And they brought him a priest, which basically just consoled him and convinced him to go through with the fight. And it happened exactly like he saw it happen in his dream. He dodged, and then he came around with a left hook and killed the guy. And Jimmy Doyle later died in the hospital. So these abilities that we have that are so ordinary, everybody knows the story of Sugar Ray Robinson having that dream. It's just part of our culture. It's so ordinary. And these abilities are not explored, it seems, sufficiently by science. Here's where we're going to get into some deeper waters. We're going to get a little bit into my cognitive dissonance, with this subject matter, because when we start to talk about psi abilities and conscious connection, or a connection to consciousness, being psychic, having precognition, then we get into remote viewing, then we get into astral projection, and we're going to get deeper into this stuff. When we start to talk about these things, we're talking about things that are quite spiritual, metaphysical, and kind of miraculous. And the cognitive dissonance that I have is that we live in a universe, we live in a world where we have to decide for ourselves if miracles happen or if they don't happen. And there's a duality to this. There's two sides of me on this. And between those two sides is a lot of friction and cognitive dissonance. One is the side of life where miracles don't happen. And this has haunted me my whole life. And the two stories that come to mind, and this is going to get dark, okay, so just some trigger warning, are the guy that his airplane crashed in the middle of the Alaskan interior, in the middle of winter. Despite praying, despite desperately hoping for spiritual intervention, guidance, nothing came. And it's always been a very disturbing story. This guy ended up trekking out, wrapping himself in his parachute, not being guided, no miracles happening, just really thinking, oh shit, I'm alone. Like there's no angel's gonna come. I gotta just go until I die, I guess. And he walked along a creek for 3 months, wrapping himself in his parachute. He ended up getting spotted by somebody, like on a dog sled or something, and he was saved. That story has always disturbed me because my own life is like that. There were times where I really needed some sort of substantial miracle to manifest, and just absolutely nothing happened at all. Even with the big stuff, like I want to know who I should marry. That was a big one for me. That the fact that I wasn't told by a spiritual entity or guided by some higher spiritual power towards a clear understanding of who I should marry. The fact that didn't happen has always disturbed me, because that's such a huge decision. And now I have 4 kids, right? So, but no spiritual entity, no God, nothing. Sometimes we're just, the nature of life is so incredibly empty and alone. It feels. Now, this is where we're going to get real dark and really graphic. Continuing on with this empty, scary universe, it's always shocked my brain that children in the Holocaust died in the act of praying to God for protection. They were killed. And not only were they killed, some of them were taken to concentration camps and taken from their family and tortured to death. And these are people that are actively praying to the Abrahamic God for help. Now, even if the Abrahamic God doesn't exist, it seems that some compassionate entity in the universe would step in. Intervention is the expectation that I have had for a lot of my life. Now, I know that this got really deep and really heavy. I've always thought through my life, something has to account for a universe where nothing happens, even when things are dire, and even when there are desperate needs, still there is an intervention. So whatever spiritual framework you have has to account for the nothingness and the non-miracles, the absence of miracles. Okay, now we talked about cognitive dissonance. That's one side, the scary side, the no miracle side, where nothing happens. And then there's the other side, which is just as real. And both of these sides, in my experience on this earth so far, both of these sides exist. The one where nothing happens, and then the one where there's all sorts of intervention and spiritual phenomenon and paranormal phenomenon. And it gets really weird as far as even poltergeists, cryptids, astral projection, alien abductions. So I'm gonna just rapid fire read a bunch of stuff that are different types of spiritual interventions, and likely you have experienced probably I don't know, 30 to 50 of these. I'm going to go through real fast. Intuitions, obviously. Visitations. I've had visitations from my grandpa. Incredible experience. And I'll probably talk about that in another podcast. Apparition in space and time. It could happen in the mind or in dreams or in real space and time. Dreams and visions, precognitions, inspiration, revelation, intense knowings, promptings, burning in the bosom, electricity, tingling, eureka moments, epiphanies, light bulbs, intense feeling of being loved, peace, and acceptance. That's a big one in a lot of religious spaces, that intense feeling of peace. Poignant sense of love for self and a sense of love for others. NDEs, non-local perception outside of the body. Intense clarity, sudden ability to visualize problems, beliefs, or structures. Just the ability to see something and you're like, oh, I haven't seen it like this before, but now I can visualize it. Suddenly being able to see what you're afraid of. The ability to notice incongruencies and turn these into doubts and then questions, then research, then deconstruction, then pain, and then better conclusions. This ability to go through that process is, in a sense, its own type of spiritual intervention. Connect the dots, synchronicities, serendipity. This is when we talk about quote unquote blessings. The pieces fall into place. External miraculous things, like pushed away from a cliff, or a voice says stop, or you feel a hand squeeze you before you step, something falls or whatever. That's the type of external stuff that everybody wants and expects. But that's also the type of thing that almost never ever happens. In fact, I would just say for most people, no matter how much they want those things to happen, this is just my opinion, this is just how it seems to me, they don't happen. They don't. Very interesting. And I'm actually going to talk about that in just a sec. So this is going to come back around to a very spiritual place, by the way. We're into some heavy stuff, but it's going to come back up. In passions that others don't feel, clear questions that others don't have, messages or clarity from general higher consciousness, messages or clarity from individual consciousness, like guides, for instance, or dead loved ones, or some type of entity, lucid dreaming, sudden recollection from past lives, channeling ideas or abilities. You can channel abilities. An example of this is Robin Williams, Mike Tyson, who nobody really understands Mike Tyson. He's a boxing genius. He was obsessed with the sport. He studied Sonny Liston and every single boxer that was before them, like down to what they ate. And Mike Tyson was obsessed with learning how to keep a guard. And anyway, he was channeling the sport of boxing, honestly. Just like Robin Williams channeled comedy, just like Noam Chomsky channels politics. He's incredible with it. Seeing things from a perspective outside of your own beliefs, that can be its own spiritual experience sometimes. So that's like an ayahuasca type situation. Seeing a subject visually without ever being taught about that subject, and then finding out later that what you saw completely aligns with scientific literature and what has been observed. Remote viewing, visioning, like some people say, spiritual sense of presence for both peaceful things and scary things. This is like the sense of a ghost being near you. Clairvoyance, varying psychic abilities, astral projection, glimpses of some aspect of past, present, or future. So that would be like prophecy type stuff, or clarity on past events. Varying levels of communication with people after death, hauntings and ghosts, obviously. Paranormal phenomenon, that's huge. We could go talk about all sorts of things, orbs and everything. Cryptids, animal communication, visualizations of a god, angel, religious figure, or other trusted entities giving you an explanation for something in order for you to trust and accept new information. That's some really deep shit. I'll talk about that a lot. I will talk about that a lot on lots of coming podcast episodes. For many, this is the only acceptable avenue through which new information is allowed to come in. So the iconography of the faith language that the person grew up in or whatever is generally what's used during a near-death experience to convey messages. And so that's interesting. Okay, you'll automatically go through many of these without trying. Some are available for you to go and experience intentionally, though, like ayahuasca is a good example of this. And still others will never happen to a lot of people. A lot of the stuff that I just mentioned is never going to happen to me or you. I might not ever astral project. Gosh, I really want to, though. I've never experienced it, though. A lot of these different things. But the point is, of all of the things that I just read off, and by in no way am I saying this is like an exhaustive list, but all of the things that I just read off, you've probably experienced, let's say 15 to 25 of those things. So back to the cognitive dissonance. We have one universe. We're occupying both of these universes, you and I. It's a very interesting thing to talk about. So we have one universe where the guy crashes in Alaska and nothing, regardless of how much he prays, nothing at all happens to help him out in that situation. He ends up he's almost starving to death, becoming desperate, becoming this primal ape man, and just through a series of happy accidents, he survives. We have people that get lost for 4 years in the Pacific Ocean. 4 years. This Mexican guy, I think it was like 4 years that he was lost, survived the whole time, drinking turtle blood and stuff. How is that fair? Why isn't a spiritual entity coming? Why aren't all these spiritual things happening to get him out of that situation? We have the Holocaust, the children. We have horrific things where there isn't the intervention. That's one space. We have the rugby team in the Andes literally praying for rescue and not getting it for like 92 days straight. And they have to eat, like, I think it's like more than half of them end up getting eaten. So that's the scary part. And then we have this other part of life that's literally filled with spiritual intervention all the time. It's not even rare. And it's funny because even today, I woke up, I did push-ups, I meditated, I went jogging through the mountains, and I had all sorts of insights and downloads and clarity about things. And then at the same time, I'm frustrated that during my divorce, I wasn't spiritually led. I didn't have clarity on exactly where the right place to live and the next apartment would be. It was just totally up to me. And it was, so there's so much emptiness and loneliness and vacancy. And then I turn around to the other space and it's just robust. It's boiling over with spiritual intervention. There's such a strange dichotomy to experience. I'm experiencing them both at the same time. I hope this makes sense, by the way. I'm not trying to preach to anybody, but this is just an interesting insight. All of that, and still life doesn't necessarily need to have a purpose. You can feel drawn to give yourself a purpose for a time, but it doesn't mean all life everywhere in the universe itself has that purpose. But if you see purpose as intention, then yes, there are conscious entities with the plan and intentions to help you through your life. This is my opinion. These are my beliefs. I'm not a religious person anymore. I've deconstructed from religion, but this is my worldview still. This does not mean they will necessarily lead you away from harm or stop you from hurting yourself or making bad decisions, but they may do exactly those things. But this would be to help with a planned theme. It seems to me, right, that you have invited them to help with. It's not that it's their will. I would guess it was a project you invited them to help you with during your life. So I know that that's not great. I'm not saying that I have any answers, but that's just kind of how I personally am bridging this gap between the cognitive dissonance of those two paradigms, if that makes sense. I want to get back to the telepathy tapes. One of the most fascinating stories in there is about an autistic boy named Kyle, and he gives his mother music in dreams, and she will remember the tune when she wakes up.
And one of the ways he writes these albums is through the telepathic link he establishes with people in dreams.
We bridged through dreaming, and that's how the songwriting started, where Kyle started giving me words and would hum a tune when I'd wake up remembering that tune, or almost humming that tune as I was waking up in the morning.
For his album named Beyond the Syntax,
he came to me and he told me that he wanted me to write songs about what it's like to be autistic, what it's like for him to experience the world. He said, these songs I want you to write for me. You've just got to try and remember. So I dreamt pretty much all the songs in one night. So I woke up trying to write all the words down that I could remember, and then I fell back to sleep again. And then I got up in the morning, started carry on writing again, seeing if I could recall the themes of the songs and some of the words he'd given me. My job is to get pen to paper as fast as possible.
It seems that when people are not fully able to come into language, these abilities that are typically dormant in our culture are activated or remain active. Some people say that as we learn language, those telepathic abilities deactivate. It's very interesting. So I want to just finish with this, okay? I just wanted to talk about the telepathy thing, the fact that we have these cognitive abilities, and we consider them like spiritual experiences or interventions. I don't know if it's an intervention as much as it is us just discovering the river that was already running through our bodies, this consciousness that's already there. It's less of an intervention and more of us encountering ourselves, it seems. We already believe, by the way, in telepathy. We believe in telepathy. Everybody. You might not think that you believe in it. You absolutely believe in telepathy. In our culture in the West, we believe in prayer, generally, the religious people. But the idea is that you can speak in your mind, and a higher entity, because they are higher than you, they are more conscious than you, perhaps they're more righteous or more powerful or whatever, they have the permission, they have the authority, the power, the permission, whatever it is, to pick up your thoughts. In other words, we already have the framework for telepathy. We just don't think we can do it. It's like there's a wall for us, but somebody who's higher consciousness, there's no ceiling. There's a wall, but there's no ceiling. So entities of higher consciousness absolutely can hear our thoughts and respond to our thoughts and give us promptings and intuitions and whatever. But we're too feeble to do that with other people. We can't look into someone's thoughts and interact with someone's thoughts because we're these low creatures. But higher creatures, higher spiritual entities can do this. So we already have the framework that this is possible. Now we're just learning that we, in fact, can do these things. That the human brain can do these things. And studying and observing these autistic people with these telepathic abilities is helping us to discover, oh, this isn't necessarily a God thing. This is a human thing that we can wake up to. So I'll just end it there. I just think, I think that this stuff is absolutely fascinating, and I could talk about it in 1,000 different directions. But yeah, I'm going to continue to talk about this stuff. This is going to be a place where I really share my voice. There has to be a place somewhere on the internet where Nathan Rio just is Nathan Rio, where I can just truly show up as myself, and someone can come in and they can say, oh, that's what that guy is like. I know what he's like because I've been to his podcast. There has to be a place where I can authentically show up. And I really want to do that 2 to 3 times a week, guys. It's really sad that my last podcast was 8 months ago. We're going to start dedicating ourselves to this podcast. I don't know why I'm speaking of myself in the plural, but we're going to start dedicating ourselves to this podcast, and to Patreon as well. So I want to share my voice. I've always known that I have to be some type of communicator. And so this is the place where I'm going to share my voice, and on TikTok, and I'm going to connect it to Blue Sky and a couple other things, obviously Apple Podcast and Spotify. So I love you guys. Support me, please. All right. I'll see you in my next podcast, which is going to be like on Monday. Bye.